MEND focuses on a problem called short bowel syndrome, which is caused by massive intestinal resection, mostly in the pediatric population. This leaves patients unable to eat or drink and are stranded on IV nutrition or total parenteral nutrition with no good treatment options. And while TPN allows babies to grow out of infancy and into toddlerhood and school age and even young adulthood, it's very costly. For the patients, there's 100% morbidity. This is in the way of line infection, liver failure, sepsis, requiring many hospitalizations, high mortality rate, and overall poor quality of life. It's also costly for the payers. Each one of these kids costs $300,000 per year for life. So MEND is focused on treating these children with short bowel syndrome and their families, of which there's 20,000 current patients at home on TPN and 2,700 new potential patients created each year in the NICUs across the country. The other customer are the payers, who foot the bill for that $300,000 per year. This is not only for the TPN, but also for those complications and readmissions. So our solution is to cure short bowel syndrome. This is a short-term treatment that's an endoscopic procedure that's not invasive. This induces permanent growth of new functional bowel through a process called mechanotrasduction. Mechanotrasduction is a mechanical stimulus that causes cell turnover and tissue growth. This is a principle that's been used in plastic surgery and orthopedic surgery for decades, but it had never been applied to intestinal lengthening until my predecessor and mentor for 10 years, Diann said, what happens if I push or pull on small bowel? And he was able to grow a lot of small bowel in a very short period of time. He then spent the better part of a decade proving that this wasn't just stretching out intestine, but actually inducing growth of functional bowel. When I joined the lab in 2011, we started working on proof of concept devices that take it to a more clinical product. This is a schematic of our current device. What we have here is a flexible catheter extension mechanism in between two dilating fenestrated mesh balloon attachments. There's also an atraumatic tip to help during placement and the displacement product. The lower panel here shows basically our procedure where we insert the device through an ostomy or natural orifice. The balloons are then inflated to couple to the small bowel. The balloons are then distracted, inducing growth in between the two. The balloons can be deflated and the device recycled. This is a picture of our current product showing that we can basically create tension in between our two attachment points. Those stitches aren't there to help anchor the device, but just to show that we can get that as a reference point. We do have some good intellectual property. We're still waiting on the actual attachment, but we had recent office action, and we look like we're going in the right direction for that. So what's the value? MEND provides a permanent cure for short bowel syndrome. This will allow children to discontinue TPN and eat and drink like their peers. This will greatly improve the quality of life. It will eliminate the need for and complications of TPN. It also eliminates that $300,000 price tag per child. So if you take the $300,000 times the 20,000 who are at home on TPN right now, that's $6 billion in annual cost that payers are footing the bill for. Even a partial response carries benefit. This will lower the amount of TPN, but also if children can eat any amount, that will decrease their complication rate and readmission rate. So the advantages, again, is this is a cure, it's a non-invasive short-term treatment, and the majority of short bowel patients are going to be candidates for MEND therapy. So the stakeholders, again, I think I've mentioned, are patients and family and the payers. So the total addressable market is hollow organ lengthening. This can be taken out of small bowel and placed into other hollow organs. But our serviceable addressable market is the short bowel syndrome. Again, there's 2,700 new patients per year in the NICU. Now, children have to grow to toddler size before they can use MEND therapy, and about 35% of those children will either die or wean from TPN without MEND. So our target market is that 65% of the 2,700 or 1,800 new patients stranded on TPN. Now there are some exclusions. Children with extremely short or extremely dilated bowel would not be able to receive MEND therapy. We envision that a patient would undergo about 3 treatments to get to a cure or a positive effect. We'd price each one of these therapies at $500,000, and we envision this as a pay-for-performance model, meaning the company wouldn't get any reimbursement until we have a positive effect. We envision this as starting at Michigan as a center of excellence, but once it takes off, having an East Coast and a West Coast partner. What's out there now to treat short bowel syndrome? Well, there's surgical lengthening, which is a wide open laparotomy in a patient who's already had multiple operations. That's invasive, risky. A very small proportion of the patients are actually eligible for this treatment, and it has a very poor wean rate from TPN. There's also bowel transplant, which is limited to even smaller proportion of the patients because the 5-year survival is just still so poor. There's also some growth hormone that just isn't a great product overall because there's a malignancy risk. The effects have actually been shown to be reversible, and it costs $300,000 per year. So that's $600,000 total for those patients, and it's not approved in kids. So when we look at MEND versus the available products, we think that it's widely applicable, this is curative, it's inexpensive for us to make the device, and it's a low-risk procedure. So what have we done from a regulatory standpoint? Well, we've already been granted humanitarian use device designation. We've had a pre-submission meeting with the FDA just last year, and we've partnered with NAMSA, which is an outside regulatory group. What we'd like to do is apply for early feasibility designation and get breakthrough device status. That basically allows us to go back and forth with the FDA on a speed dial type of operation. We want to get to investigational device exemption, meaning that we can then perform the clinical studies, and eventually get to humanitarian device exemption so we can use these in children. So what are the risks? Well, there are definite technical risks. This is a device that's taken about 18 years to get to where we are right now. There's some parts of the device that aren't medically certified, so we would like to establish partnerships with commercial groups to take the device from our lab, our engineering lab, out into a commercial build. Getting from an academic device to a marketable device, well, we're an academic team. I don't really know how to do that, and the engineers don't know either. But we've contracted with consultants both within the department, within the institution, but also outside firms to help us get to those points. And then there's the biggest risk, the funding gap. To take this from an academic endeavor to a de-risk marketable product. And we've done something a little bit novel here and partnered with a nonprofit organization. So the goal of the nonprofit is to take us through FDA clearance. And what we envision is that the nonprofit will license the technology from the university. And then when the timing is right, the nonprofit will then sublicense to either a startup company or an existing large firm. That would then pay back the IP, but then all the royalties that would come would be split between the university and the nonprofit. The nonprofit would then become an evergreen model and be able to bring new products that can be that are difficult to get to market otherwise. So this is kind of our milestones, and each one of these blue diamonds represents one. And as we were presenting, this is what we kind of had to date. So we already have funding to get to design freeze or concept freeze, and we wanted to get back to the FDA for another pre-sub meeting to make sure that they agreed that our new safety measures were what they were in line with what they were thinking. We were fortunate and happy to get some funding to use the Innovation Prize money to get a device in hand, to take the product from our engineering lab to a commercial build. We have a lot of costs after that, of course, but this is a very important milestone because that's when the nonprofit, was aptly named the Teitelbaum Foundation, will start taking over the cost of validating and verifying the design. So again, that's what this money is going to be used for, is to build and verify components of the device and get us into a good lab practice animal testing before applying for our IDE. So this is our group. I'd like to thank again the department for giving the opportunity to talk. I'd be remiss to not put a picture of Dr. Diann Teitelbaum, who was again my mentor for 10 years and the originator of this project and did the lion's share of the work. Thank you very much.